and welcome back to Not My Timeline. Rather, if you're a planner looking to maximize your client's budget, or if you're a couple considering how to bring costs down. In this episode, I'm going to break down one of my $1 million budgets and also walk you through how you can bring your costs down without losing your guest experience. As a planner, I think what sets you apart is not only when you're able to curate your client's experience, but when you're also able to anticipate your guest experience too. To make all of your client dreams come true, you have to first start with the money talk. Today, we're going to start walking through one of my budgets. This one took place in Northern California, approximately around 215 guests at a 5-star luxury resort property. And in total, wedding day came to about $1.25 million. How? I'm going to walk you through it. One of the biggest line items couples have to account for is their venue. And coming from a background working on venues, I like to think I know a thing or two. When having the budget talk with my clients, I usually start with, what's your overall number? Maybe they might throw out a 300,000, 400, 600. I'm like, that's really great. But let's put it actually into perspective here. You're wanting to have 200 of your closest friends all fly in to a 5-star property resort. That alone is going to have a hefty price tag. When considering your venue, there's usually 2 different options I walk through with my clients when they have a bigger guest count. Typically, my guest counts are usually 175 guests to around 250. When you have such a large guest count, you can consider doing a full property buyout. When you're doing so, typically then you have to consider buying out the outlets, the restaurants, the spa, the fitness center, whatever it may be. All of that needs to be taken into account. How the rooms are handled is actually separate from the venue. And this is one of the biggest pieces of advice I give to couples who are considering having their wedding at a hotel property resort is first and foremost, that hotel is a hotel. Then second, a wedding venue. And while you may think you are spending an insane amount of money, which you are, I'm not saying you're not, but every weekend, every couple is spending an insane amount of money. And if you're not going to spend it, another couple will. So for this specific budget, this one wasn't a buyout. This actually was about 70 rooms were taken offline out of about 140, let's say. So for about 70 rooms, if you just want to go ahead and assume with me, 2 people per room, that's about 140 of my guests that stayed on site. Offsite, I had about 90 guests. So overall venue costs for this couple was around $265,000. This then includes the bride's and the groom's breakfast. One of the items couples already aren't considering, they get that food and beverage adjustment at the end, but actually there's going to be an additional cost. So for each of them, they had about 15 people with them. So your bridesmaids, your groomsmen, your grandma, your mom, whatever it may be, each of them had about 15 people with them. So that being said, just breakfast alone combined was about $12,000. Site fee, another thing couples don't always consider. Your site fee alone was about $55,000. That $55,000 though should have been around, let's call it $25,000 for just the wedding day alone. This specific wedding, we had additional setup and breakdown days. I didn't do a full-scale tent, but I did kind of what I call the next step underneath it. A wooden trellis, if you will. Still requires a couple days for setup and again, a couple days to take down. One of the misconceptions I feel a lot of my couples have is they say, great, I want to have a big, beautiful tent. Awesome. It doesn't go up the day of your wedding, and it certainly does not come down the night of either. It takes time. So that original $25,000 for a site fee grew for our additional setup and breakdown days. Food and beverage. Pre-COVID, I always told couples, whatever your food and beverage estimate comes to from your venue, initially double it right off the bat. That's a realistic number to anticipate for your overall wedding day spend. Post-COVID, I tell couples it's typically 3, if not 3.5, even 4 times that number. Things have gone up. So if you're looking to have quick conversations with your couples about budget, these are all the things I'm sharing on my initial first lead call. I feel like it's such a disservice for your couple and also yourself to spend that time telling them your budget of $500,000 is going to work for your 200 guests. And I'm not saying there isn't a scenario where it can work. And I think that's something I'm always so mindful of, to have that conversation with my couples. I'm not saying you can't get married for this incredible amount of money, but if you're wanting the guest experience that you've explained to me you do, then this is realistically what you're going to spend. I think it's also important to note it's also proportionate to how you live your life. If your family's vacationing at the Four Seasons, you're probably going to want to have your wedding there. It's what feels like home. Other line items that couples don't always anticipate when they get their original food and beverage estimate back. No knock to the venue, but their job is to show you how to reach their minimum spend for food and beverage. You might receive, even at your 200, even 225 guest count, a food and beverage estimate that's going to come back at, let's say, $80,000. And again, you can spend that. That's likely going to look like no welcome drinks upon arrival, maybe 3 cocktail hour hors d'oeuvres. Then as you get into your dinner reception, likely it's a 2-course plated meal, a starter salad, main course entree, and then probably just a cake for dessert. Beverages, probably at your cocktail hour, you had an open bar, beer, wine, cocktails, not a premium package. Same thing for dinner. Bar continues. Dinner wines, you're probably looking at your entry-level dinner wines. When I receive back a food and beverage estimate from a venue, I immediately start line iteming them out. There's so much more that I already know from the jump that my couples need. I know they're going to want tray pass water upon guest arrival, maybe some lemonade. I don't always recommend champagne so early in the day, but we'll leave it at that. For cocktail reception, usually I recommend to my couples 4, a vegetarian, a meat, a fish option, and then one other that they both just love. Cocktails. You need a great bar. It sets the tone. If you're looking to offset some of your costs, maybe for your rehearsal dinner, your welcome reception the night before, you do a lesser bar package. But on your wedding date, you go for it. Get them Casamigos Blanco. Go for it. Dinner service for this budget, how we got to around $200,000. This one for dinner service had a 3-course plated meal. Salad, a middle course, maybe it was a soup, maybe it was scallops. And then your main course entree, of course, your option of beef, fish, and vegetarian. For this couple for dessert, we opted for cake. That was all done on their dinner reception space. When they moved up to the after party, that's when we had some late night bites, 2 savory and 2 sweet treats. Another line item couples don't always account for in their food and beverage estimate is you need to feed your vendors. Please feed your vendors a hot meal. Most of us are working minimum 10-hour days. Your planning team, probably 18 hours like I do. If you want your vendors to show up for you, please take into account, and as small as it is, a hot meal goes a long way. Other vendors you're going to need a part of your day. Photography. And I'm not saying there isn't incredible photographers at many different price points. This is a luxury editorial photographer. Likely around $70,000 for just the one day. But to put in perspective, that photographer is likely showing up for your guest count of around 220 guests with a minimum of 3 shooters, likely 4, if not 5. And as a planner, I want you to show up with your team. I want you to be so prepared to get the guest's view, the client's view, the vendor's view. You need a full team. Next, videographer, $50,000. Again, showing up with 3 to 4 shooters, also working 10 to 12 hours together. Side note, I would recommend having your photographer and videographer having the same amount of time. Meaning, if they're both scheduled for 10 hours, schedule them for 10 hours, starting at the same time, 1 p.m., and again, ending together. Reason being is often photography and videography partner together on what they're capturing. It makes no sense to me to have your photographer shoot your flat lay because he's arrived an hour earlier, but then your videographer is going to need to do that same flat lay again. It doesn't make sense. It's not a good use of your timeline. Entertainment. For this wedding, this couple spent around $124,000 on entertainment. And I want to break it down for you because I think it's a big misconception when you're explaining to a couple how you're going to allocate their funds is they see a price tag of $60,000 for a band and they're like, how did you get then to $124,000? But there's additional pieces that go into it. So let's break it down. It starts with your ceremony. This couple wanted a string trio. Typically, pricing for that is individual to each musician, around $3,000 per hour. Next, you move into cocktails. Also, you're extending that trio for an additional hour. So that being said, already was $18,000 just for ceremony and cocktails. Surprise cost? Your sound. Just because you have musicians doesn't mean you have the microphone, the PA system to actually amplify your ceremony so your guests can hear you. That for this couple was around $6,000. Next, moving into dinner reception. Most entertainment bands are usually formatted for like a 3 or 4 hour time block, which is typically how long my dinner receptions are going, from the time that the guests enter to when they're leaving. So let's say guests are invited into the say 6 p.m., 10 p.m., they're moving up into our after party space. I like to have my bands already on stage when my guests are entering into dinner. It's inviting. It sets the tone already that we're here to party, we're here to celebrate. I want to be clear. It's not that you can't get a band for less than $60,000, but I want to talk about what kind of band you'd be getting for less. If you're a couple and you're looking for a band and your budget's somewhere between, let's say, 12 to 20,000, the difference in that band versus the one at 60,000 is that band at that lesser price point isn't a band that typically plays together. They're usually individual musicians available on the same date. What that means is they're arriving early, practicing then, and they're hoping to deliver you a great night. I don't know about you, but that doesn't work for me. Not that it hasn't. I want to clarify. I've worked with different vendors at all different parts of my career. I've had great bands at that price point. But for me, now with my luxury clientele, I want them to know if I'm showing them a band, that's exactly the lead singer showing up that day. It's important. Let's talk about band size, because that also plays a factor into your price point. Typically, bands are somewhere starting between like 8 or 11 pieces. That's a good entry-level band. At that price point, you're probably looking closer to like that $30K mark. Once you start getting into the 16 and 20 person orchestras, that's when you're getting into the 40s, 50s, 60s, and even higher. Majority of my couples are opting for that 16 and 20 person orchestra. Why? Because how impactful is it when you walk into a dinner space and there's a full orchestra band on the stage? It sets the tone. Honest answer, don't book an entertainment group your planner hasn't seen before. So hot tip, if you work in entertainment, you're a DJ, you own a band management company, bring the planner out. Have a showcase. Let us see your talent, because honestly, it's the best way for me to know if they're a good fit for my couple. Half of it for me is pairing who do I see their friend groups, their family jiving with, or what age group are they, or what? Are you a DJ who just clicks play, or are you the DJ who's truly like vibing with your clients, you're dressing to the theme, you're involved, you're in it? I personally will not put an entertainment group in front of my clients unless I've seen them. I want to know with full confidence that you're going to make the party happen. Why? Because there's one time I had what I called my big fat Jewish wedding. It was maybe like 240 people. Gosh, it was like 108 that day on the turf lawn. And catering, unfortunately, was falling behind in our timeline. What do? I turned to the band leader and I said, I need you to play. It wasn't their contracted time. This was supposed to be a break. And he said, for how long? I said, I don't know. An impromptu, the whole group, again, I think they were like a 15-person band at the time, but they hopped on stage. To my client, they just had an impromptu dance party in the middle of their dinner, and it was one of their highlights of their wedding day. For me, I just saved my fucking wedding because nobody was now baking at their dinner tables waiting for food to come, but everybody was up out of their seats. It brought the energy up, and so when food was ready, everybody was able to take their seats. Next tip, become friends with your band. Again, they can save your day. After parties. Often I think for couples, when they're considering their budget, they are not remembering there's another space. Not only do they need to account for setup, but also for entertainment. So, after party DJ. Again, this is just my typical event flow. Usually my couples are choosing to have live entertainment for their ceremony, their cocktails, their dinner reception, and then they'll opt for the DJ after. Usually the older folks go to bed and then they want to turn up. DJs, an ultra luxury DJ price point, $40,000. The difference in what you're getting for a DJ who's possibly pricing themselves at $2,000 to $8,000 typically is a DJ who may not care per se about the genre that you like, but they're click and play on their laptop. Like that's what they're there for. They brought the speaker. They're not there to create the kind of environment that you're hoping for to end your night. For me, that $40,000 DJ, again, is coming dressed to your theme. and they're coming in at already, not even like a level 10, they already know some of your guests have tapered off, so they got to come in even higher. So kind of the tier below them would be somewhere around that 25,000. Again, still a great DJ. I certainly still work with them in that price point, but typically my couples are opting for that 40,000 celebrity style DJ to end their night. Let's talk florals. And first, to be able to do so, I think it's important to note not all planners are designers. I myself probably spoon feed what I want my floral designs to look like to my floral designers. I want it to be a collaboration, but often by the time I'm bringing them in, I already know my client. Often I'm working with them, usually minimum 18 months out, typically 2 years. So again, by the time we're having that conversation, so much has happened. There's already been initial mood boards, all the things. So it's just easier for me to really just like spoon feed and please deliver. Often my floral budgets can range. I've certainly done things for $50,000, and I've also done things where I've given my florist $1 million budget before. For this one specifically, the couple spent about $300,000 just on their wedding day. And unfortunately, most of those florals do get thrown out the next day. That being said, let me break down what we actually used florals for. Ceremony. They certainly had beautiful runners lining the aisles, a big, beautiful arch or some kind of focal point for the couple in their ceremony. Ceremony alone was probably around $80,000, let's just say. Bridal bouquet, you have multiple different bridesmaids, probably some corsages for grandma and your mom, the boutonnieres for the guys. Before you know it, even your personal flowers are already at $10,000. Next, cocktail reception. Typically for my escort displays, I do like to have some kind of floral to accent corners or whatever that may be. Bars, I think it's really important to have great focal points on your bars. Cocktail tables, coffee tables. Usually, I'll be honest, your cocktail reception floral is not the highest point of your budget. Once you get into dinner, I think it's important to note how many tables you're actually using. So for a guest count of, again, 200 people minimum, you're going to need 25 tables. And that's just assuming you have 8 people per table. So realistically, again, this budget was for about 220. I probably had like 30 to 35 tables, just considering like their actual setup for that day. For our timeline, it was important to me to not move florals from ceremony into dinner reception to repurpose. I am so big on, I want it to be like Disneyland for my couples and really for the guests. I'm so happy to repurpose and to reuse things. Let's definitely save on costs, but not at the loss of your client experience. So one of the things couples often like to do is reuse their aisle florals to put on front of their dinner reception stage. That's great. But when you're considering your timeline and you're wanting to have room-ready photos with your photographer and videographer, that's not giving enough time for your vendor team, your florist, to transport your florals from ceremony into your dinner reception if you're still taking ceremony photos with your family and friends, and yet it needs to be set in 15 minutes for your final photos of your dinner reception space. Your timeline math ain't timelining. So that being said, for this couple, we did already just plan to have separate dinner reception florals in front of our stage. That went into our costs. Rentals. Often I think couples think because the venue comes with linens and china and glassware and flatware that they won't need to spend any of that on their budget. I'm not saying you can't, but again, for the experience that you're wanting, the aesthetic that you've been dreaming of, sometimes you need to spend the money. So yes, while this venue certainly included all of those items, maybe even a few like tables and a ceremony chair option for us, I cannot tell you the last time I had a wedding use the white resin folding chairs that came with the venue. Typically, my couples are opting to rent additional chairs. So with that, there was rented ceremony chairs. We had a ceremony aisle and same thing going into cocktail reception. Everything was rented. Lounge furniture, cocktail bars, high boys, linens, everything. Dinner. For this couple, I still wanted to have a way where we were being mindful of the items that we didn't have to necessarily supplement with. So, for instance, this venue supplied real Riedel glassware. It's beautiful. I don't need to then rent Riedel glassware. But for me, being the designer that I am, I refuse to not intentionally look at your full dinner setup. So what I mean is, for me, your strongest touch point is your dinner setting where your guests are seated for their table. It's the one location in your wedding day that your guests are actually seated in one spot for a few hours at a time. So make it a comfortable chair. Have a really beautiful napkin. Personally, I love velvet. I think it's just soft and luxurious. Wherever it may be, I want your couples to start using their different senses. Like I said, the venue offered real Riedel glassware. I chose, for a design perspective, to rent a water goblet. We had a charger and a show plate. And then we rented flatware. Why? The venue came in silver. I wanted black. It's really often just a design perspective. If you're a couple and you're okay with the pieces that come from the venue, great. Go for it. Maybe that is then just your water goblet and just a rented napkin. Just those things alone can enhance your day. Anything that you see a part of a wedding day that's typically more aesthetically pleasing, I'm going to promise you right now, it's rented. So for this couple specifically, their rented furniture came to around $50,000. Lighting's important to your wedding day. But as a planner, I think it's important for us to intentionally have that conversation with their clients about when is it too much and when is it actually needed. For my couples, the very first thing I do is I Google sunset in their location on their wedding day, because then that tells me when, ideally, do I need to start having lighting included in my plan. For this couple, they didn't have any lighting needs a part of their ceremony. They didn't have anything a part of their cocktail reception. But for dinner, that was happening at sunset. So you have to have ample lighting, not only just to, of course, light your dinner table so your guests can enjoy your food, but it's also having to think through where could they be moving to, that walking path that leads them to the bathroom. The venue didn't supply lighting to there. That was something I needed to account for. That alone was probably an additional $10,000. Improper lighting or malfunctioning lighting, not having enough power to support not only your band and your lighting and your catering, all can create problems for your day. Have real conversations with your vendors, how much power they need. Beyond just the practicality of needing lighting, I think it's so important for couples to understand it makes or break your photos and video. You're going to spend all this on just creating a beautiful moment, but if your team can't actually capture it properly, what did you spend all that money for? Often for my couples, especially in locations like Napa, Sonoma, wine country, if you will, they're usually opting to have dinner al fresco, meaning outside in an open air. But I have to so politely remind my couples, it costs money. So to build a tent structure for a guest count, again, of around 120 people, likely that tent structure is going to cost anywhere from $100,000 to even $150,000. For this one, we opted for a trellis. That saved my couple almost half of that. Around $80,000 is what they spent. To go a bit further into tents, because I think it's one of those, as a planner, you don't know until you know. And as couples, you don't realize how much actually goes into it. For instance, I just produced a wedding in Nashville. We were out there building for almost 2.5 weeks before even the wedding even took place. The structures that we're building is not just like a pop-up, typically like a Sperry tent or whatever it may be. These are full-blown structures with air conditioning, heating, subfloor, carpeting, staging, lighting, all of it, it becomes a puzzle piece. And with that, when you're working at a hotel resort property, the days that you need to set up also cost additional money, not just from a tent perspective, but also from a management perspective. Our team overseeing, the venue overseeing, the additional vendor meals you may be required to offer. It all goes into it. For planners, I think it's really important to learn what it takes to actually build a tent. For me, early on in my career, I would go to different showrooms and I would have those conversations with those who actually build the tent, because me, I did not own my first hammer until this past December. I can't build shit. Okay. So I don't know, but I need to know so I could properly put my pieces together of the puzzle of when things go in. A couple other things that my couple chose to include in their budget: beauty services, hair and makeup trial, obviously their hair and makeup artist for the bride, and as well the ladies also getting ready with her that weekend, came to about $16,000. An additional beauty spend was a stylist. Not necessarily to help my bride pick out her attire, but this was on the wedding day. Something I do not do is I am not steaming my couple's dresses. I'm not fixing buttons. That is not within my repertoire. So I always recommend hire a seamstress who's going to come on site, press everything for you, can help if a zipper breaks, whatever it may be. There was this one time, I always make this suggestion to my couples, but of course they're in the driver's seat. And so to tell them you're going to be spending somewhere between $5,000 to even $10,000 to have this seamstress on site, it seems like such a crazy additional spend that you may or may not necessarily need. And oh, it's okay. My mom's going to steam my dress in the morning. Well, when you're in a room of ladies doing hair and makeup, I don't know about you, but I don't want my wedding dress near any bit of that and the food and all the things. So I made this recommendation to one of my couples and they opted not to have it. No harm, no foul. That's fine. But please understand that's not what my team is there for. If you would like us to assist in that, then I can bring in additional assistance. We'll charge you for it. But that's not within our wheelhouse. On the morning of this wedding, setup's taking place. And all of a sudden, one of my assistants run over to me and she's like, we have a crisis. I said, tell me what's going on. She goes, the veil ripped. And this is a beautiful handmade cathedral veil. I said, how? She goes, one of the girls in there was steaming. She stepped on the veil. It split directly down the middle. I said, okay, let's go figure this out. So I go in, sure as shit, this thing is like just like a straight line down the middle of this veil. What are you supposed to do? Who do they look at? The wedding planner. And it's so funny because I'll never forget my bride's look on her face when she's like, this is when you said we'd want to have that seamstress on site, right? I was like, uh-huh, let me see what I could do. Maybe 2 minutes later, I'm on my hands and knees. I have super glue and I'm like trying to piece together her veil for the next hour while my team's handling setup. And it's just chaos, right? It ended up working. It ended up looking fine enough, but that's not what we're there for. And I can assure you, having your lead planner walk away from setup to be on their hands and knees gluing together a veil is not the best use of that planner's resources, time, brain power. Obviously, yes, we're there to save the day, but we're not there to fix your veil. We're there to keep your timeline moving. Some of the smaller costs my couples chose to spend their funds on. Stationery. Let's just put in broad numbers here. For a guest counter of about 220, you're going to need likely around 100 to 125 save the dates and invites. Again, assuming everybody's a couple, that's how I get that number. For this couple, for save the dates and invites, they spent around $8,000. It was paper. It wasn't anything, to be honest, over the top. For their save the date, it was a one card inside an envelope, handwritten envelope. So there is some customization, definitely a bit more elevated than necessarily minted. No knock to minted. To be quite honest with you, they stepped their game up. I'm really proud of them. But majority of my couples want to curate something that's entirely individual to them. Other stationery items you're going to need. Your menus. Directional signage. What I mean by that is maybe at your ceremony, you want something that says, welcome to the ceremony of. Most of my couples really have actually chosen to opt out of going for programs now. Probably that's been that case for me for like the last 4 years or so. Once you get into your cocktail reception, usually there are custom cocktail napkins, beautiful bar signs on either side of the bar, or if you're doing like a 360 square bar, please get multiple bar signs. Just because you do one, if your guests aren't going to only access the bar from one location, then you need to anticipate their needs. Have it from all views. Once you get into dinner, you'll have your seating chart. That's a part of your signage. Additionally, you'll also have your menus. Usually mine are custom menus with your guests' individuals' names on your menus or on whatever kind of place card there may be, as not only do you need your seating chart to tell your guests what table they're actually going to, but you need to identify what is their actual seat. And you need to do so. Reason why is for your catering team. If they have any dietary restrictions or whatever meal that they chose, it's easiest and best for your catering team to execute a 5-star dinner service if they already are prepped ahead with your planner, with your seating chart and all the things to know where that guest who's allergic to lobster is seated. Other items, parasols. Again, knowing that we were going to be in full sun for ceremony, my couple opted for those cute little like white parasol guys. We had those. That alone cost around $3,000 for just 200 of them. At their after party, they wanted to opt for a photo booth. And this can certainly kind of change, especially as you're getting into this like content creator realm, like who are you using? What are you using it for? Is your photographer doing like a pop-up photo booth and they're printing out the photo and it's being waiting in your guest room as their like nightly gift? There's so many different layers to how you can have a photo booth. For this couple specifically, they went with Mirror Mirror, who they're great. They kind of give you that editorial Justin Bieber, Kim Kardashian. That's what they're all known for. That like beautiful glow. So I would say other photo booths might be like $2,000 and below. For this one, the couple had spent at around 5 to 7. And really that was because they wanted to have the additional like instant text your guest, whatever it may be, so their guests can be posting on social media. Often my couples, when they throw out their initial budget number, they're not necessarily considering all of these additional things. So when I'm like, yeah, your 600,000 is an incredible amount of money, but let me show you how we're going to get you to $1 million. It's not because I want you to spend $1 million. It's because I actually want you to be prepared for the experience and the budget that you're going to need to spend to have it. Another piece of our design for this couple actually happened about 2 weeks out from the wedding day. The mother, who I loved our relationship because she just trusts me. She called me up about 2 weeks before and she said, I know this wedding's already going to be incredibly beautiful. What do you think would take it to the next level? And I said, I've got you. I've got two things. One was a really small change that actually didn't impact budget in any way. I just wanted another way as their guests were entering into dinner to kind of bring up the energy. So I had chosen to have the 4 lead singers on box risers as guests actually enter into the dinner reception space. So they had to like go around the musicians to get to their tables. It just created this like fun, interactive, very intentional like welcome into our space. And then as everybody finally got in, the musicians went above. So I guess when I say it was an additional spend, I think it was like $1,000 more for those like box risers for musicians to stand on. Small change, not a big impact to budget, but it was a great and probably the most memorable thing for the guest experience that they're like, I've never got to walk past the singer to get to my table. It was so fun. But when the mom had asked me, tell me something else, immediately my mind went to after party. I feel like it's often something that couples tend to forget is how can you bring the energy up? So for this one, we opted to do an LED screen behind the DJ and also on the front of the DJ booth. It kind of makes you feel like you're in a nightclub in Las Vegas without actually being in a nightclub in Las Vegas. Often venues won't allow for lasers and the fog machines as it messes with their freaking fire system, whatever it may be. Bummer. But you could still do your LED screen. And what's fun is for your DJ, again, because you're not picking the DJ who's just clicking play, you're picking the ultra luxury DJ to go with your beautiful LED screen that you just spent $30,000 on. They're going to be in it. Like they're going to be vibing so much more. They're feeding off of it. It's going to your music, whatever it may be. Like you want to set the party, then you also have to bring the party. Some other things that should be included in this budget, but aren't. One of the upsides of using a hotel venue, I tell my couples, is because often you already just have the infrastructure for an event, meaning typically they're more manicured event spaces, there's restrooms, water, lighting, and one of the most important pieces is your catering team. Having that in-house, having their kitchen equipment in-house, that alone just saves you so much money. Often venues are also including your glassware, flatware, china, which for a guest count of around 220 for just basic entry-level tabletop items, you're probably looking at like $8,000. So there is a big upside, in my opinion, using a hotel venue. But I also love a raw site. And what I mean by a raw site, it's can be an open field. It could be someone's private home. Essentially, it's not a manicured event space. When you are working at a raw site, so much more goes into the production side. Immediately then I'm telling my couples, it's not that we can't do it, but I need you to understand it's just going to be an additional spend. So some of the other things that should be in this budget would be restrooms, should be additional lighting. How do you get from one event space to the next? Usually if I'm creating the entire event spaces, I also have to consider event flow. Often I am also using guest transportation, maybe shuttles on property just to transport someone from one space to the next. Additionally, your vendor team, if you're wanting your photographer to be taking photos up at your ceremony, but then to be down in dinner reception or within 4 minutes to be shooting your room ready photos, it's just not possible. If you can't do it, your vendor team can. We could do a lot of things without you knowing, but like we can't be in 2 places at once. I, as your planner, cannot be in 2 places at once. So something to consider is your transportation for your guests and also your vendors. To talk about kind of the cost of that, a luxury restroom trailer could be anywhere, again, when you're needing one for 200 people, you're having an event for, let's call it 11 to 12 hours. Price point could be anywhere from 3 to even like 8 grand. When you're at a raw site and your team is out there building for weeks on end, you also need to account for additional restrooms for your vendors. It is probably my number one pet peeve as a wedding vendor is when vendors share restrooms with guests at an event. It will not happen in my books. I just can't. It won't. So you need an additional restroom just for your vendor team. Something to note in here is I don't actually include my couple's wedding attire in their wedding budget. What they choose to spend on their attire, in my opinion, it doesn't impact me. Again, if you're going to have a stylist, I don't care how long your wedding dress train is. Have it as long as you want. I'm not touching the thing. Unless I'm like helping you bustle. I'm here for that. But your wedding attire, in my opinion, that's your choice what you choose to spend. Real talk, how do I charge? Because I think it's always across the board. Should you be percentage? Should you be flat rate? And I know I chatted about this a bit. But for me, when you're at a hotel property, again, they're supplying so much of that initial event infrastructure. I can already just anticipate the support I'm going to get from the venue, but also just how easy the property might be. If their event spaces are much close together, then I don't need as big of a team. If, again, you're on one side of the hill and you're moving 20 minutes away to the other side to get to dinner reception, I basically need 2 separate teams fully operating on its own so I can be fully present with my client. And that's really how I staff my team is they know everything of what's going on in each of their locations. I have a lead for whatever setup it may be. But the way I am is I've already spent 2 years with my couple. I know them often better than they know themselves. So I am staffing my team in a way so I can be fully present with my client. Their family, I want them, if they're looking up a dinner reception and they need something, they know I'm right there. I actually will choose to have my team go break. I always send my team off to go eat before I ever do. But I always have that conversation with whatever venue manager there is. I want to be eating like back of house, behind the stage, behind the band, like standing, I don't care, give me my Diet Coke and I'll scarf down this food real quick because I don't want to miss anything. I'm the one who's personally teeing up the father-daughter dance. Hey, your toast's going to be happening in 5 minutes. This is your moment to go use the restroom if you need. It's me. So it's important for me to staff my team in a way where they know all the information, but I can be present with my couples. When I'm having that conversation with couples about what's my pricing going to be, yes, I am always in the broad scope, whatever your overall wedding spend. And I mean that overall wedding spend, like typically includes your whole weekend. Because if I'm out there doing your rehearsal dinner and your welcome reception on Thursday and Friday, but we're building for that whole week before, I'll be honest with you. I'm not usually then like hiring separate teams. If I just need to go head over there, my management fee like changes based off the scope of what's needed. If it's all happening at your hotel, I'm already there. But if your offsite event is at a completely different location while your setup's happening over here for your wedding, I need 2 different teams. So for this project specifically, our team took care of all of the weekend events. So that being said, knowing that it was all taking place at one hotel resort property, our team was able to stay on site. Our overall planning and design was around 70% of their overall wedding spend for their weekend. I hope it was helpful, rather as a planner or as a client, to kind of understand when somebody says they're going to spend $1.25 million on a wedding, how did you get there? Thanks for coming this week. See you next time.